Hey, how's it going, guys? Albert here, and I'm going to cover what I look for in videography for arm wrestling. It's kind of a specific thing because it's generally focused on ruggedness and utilitarian and low light, basically. So if you can think of somebody who films nature outdoors and doesn't have their own source of lighting, then that's generally what we're going to be focusing on. Even though professionals may spend a lot of money on their equipment, I still like to stay on a budget, and for good reason. I actually lost a $3,000 $4,000 a professional camcorder because it got knocked over by an athlete on accident. It wasn't his fault. It's just how it is. That's just the name of the game. So what I use is based on a few criterias. One is mainly price. I'm not going to spend over $4,000. That's just my limit. Okay, I know I can easily make really good footage with less than $1,000, and that's generally what I'm going to be focusing on right now. But for me, anything under 4,000 is good because I have more than one camera for different angles or different scenarios. So the three, other than money, the three things is clarity, which is specifically focus or the artistry of taking footage. If you use something like a GoPro, an action camera, the person 6 to 10 feet behind you from a distance, he or she could possibly still be in focus, even though the main person you're filming, the pullers, is going to be right in front of you. So for instance, this camera right here has excellent clarity. You can tell that I'm in focus, but my mic isn't. There's a grill on there that you can't see quite yet unless I let it focus there. Let me just go ahead and zoom into that box there. There you go. And it's going to focus in on it. So talking about clarity, is this thing is awesome for that because I chose it to be like that. So now I'm blurry and it's focusing on that. But if I put it away, this camera has face tracking. So it's going to focus on me, but it still identifies that I had that one object. So there it goes. It's going to be focusing on me regardless if I get close or far. This camera does a great job. The cameras with the best autofocus is Canon and Sony. I prefer Sony because their autofocus is just one step faster, and pullers are fast. If you see Michael Todd go on the inside or Daniel Moser, be ready to have some autofocus. So clarity is important, especially when you have something that has depth. So what we have right here, this image right here, me being focused and the background being blurred out, is called a shallow depth of field. You won't get much of that with an action cam or your smartphone because the lens isn't built for that. So that's one portion. When I film, I want to be able to focus on two pullers and the audience just exist. You can see you can see that they exist, but you can't identify the little details. It really gives a nice, interesting aspect. The other one is stabilization. To me, stabilization is based on the people that can't handle shaky cam. Movies like Transformers or anything by Michael Bay is all shaky cam, or the sitcom Office. A lot of people, including my wife, can't stand that kind of shakiness, like Blair Witch Project. And it gets to a point where it was good to look realistic because our eyes are moving according to our head on our neck. There's a lot of moving parts, and it makes things look more real and edgy. But when we're trying to make something cinematic, a lot of times if you're trying to hold the camera, you're better off with some kind of stabilization. Sony does not have good stabilization. You could buy one that has stabilization. This camera does not. It's a A5100. It's the cheapest one there is, but it actually went up in about $100 due to COVID because it's a really good webcam. It has a flippy screen, so I can see myself. So just keep that in mind, that stabilization does add more money, but you could get away with a camera that doesn't have stabilization and get something like this. This is a gimbal. This gimbal is a little bit more expensive because I like my craft, but you could get one for like $150 to $200 that's lighter, which is actually more ideal. With this one, it's just more heavy duty, so I don't have to worry about what kind of camera. So you can tell right now this thing is not balanced. It just, if it was balanced, it would just kind of stay up here. This was set for a different camera, but I just want to show you that the gimbal, its main purpose to me, even if you enjoy shaky cam, is the fact that this thing will stay horizontally even regardless of your position. So turning it on now, and it's on, and it's horizontal regardless of how I move. Even after I arm wrestle, if I'm shaking, this thing is going to stay steady. It's a beautiful thing. This one cost me $300, but you can find them for $150 or $200, and the $200 one, the cheaper one, is lighter, and so it's ideal. Light matters depending on your frame, right? If you're a lady that and know that you're going to be holding this for the entire tournament, weight matters, including myself. I always choose something smaller and lighter. This camera right here is a Panasonic G7. It's the cheapest 4K camera, and it works really well. It has something that a lot of cameras don't have that I'll discuss later. Turning this off now, you can see this flop over because it's not balanced. So stabilization, I rely strictly on gimbals. If you're just going to have it set right in front of the table where the down ref is, then tripod. You don't necessarily need stabilization. If you do, then you may opt for the Panasonic GH5. It gets on the pricier end. And the next one is low light performance. We're running and gunning. We don't know the scenario. A lot of times I've been told that it's indoor and I prepare for that, and then it's outdoor, and to where you could get away with your smartphone and your GoPros because you don't need low light performance. You could say that you can make footage in low light, but what you will notice is that smartphones and action cams start suffering with grain. It gets really grainy and pixelated because it's relying on something called ISO. This digital is trying to digitally enhance the image to make it viewable. But the other way, the better way, is to have a larger sensor. So with the cell phone, you have a sensor behind this tiny lens here, and compare it to a full frame sensor. The full frame sensor is going to have a larger eye to have light go in, so it's going to perform better. So if you get a full size sensor, which is a lot more expensive, is going to be able to absorb more light. There won't be that grain. It's going to perform really good. The A7 III, the Sony A7 III, has a full frame. It's going to cost you over $1,000, but more like $1,500 to $1,800. But you know, if this is your craft, then you may want to think about it. If you're entry level and you just want really good footage, the camera I'm using right now, even after COVID, is under $500, and the lens cost $400 new. So that is $1,000, under $1,000, and it performs great. Of course, A7, anything full frame is going to be good. And when A7s are full frames, and then there's A6s like the A6000, A6100, A6400. The new one is A6600. You know, incrementally, numerically larger is going to be better for some reasons. The A6600 is the same as the rest of the crop sensors of those A6s, but it has an unlimited recording time. Now, this is the interesting thing. Cameras are limited, generally in the US, are limited to 29 minutes and 59 seconds, because if it were able to record limitless, then it would be considered a camcorder, and a camcorder has more taxes for some reason. So in order to these things are restricted legally for some reason. You can get away with it by getting a European version, or this G7 actually has the ability to be unlocked in order to film unlimited. And on top of that, I removed the battery and I put in a AC adapter, so I don't have to worry about replacing batteries. The cool thing about arm wrestling is it generally is dissected or segmented per pulling. So every time I I record someone pulling. By the time it's over, I turn it off, I stop the recording, and I re-record. There's two reasons I do that on the Sony. Save battery and space on your SD card, or three things then. And the other one is overheating. If you continually record, your camera is going to overheat. So you turn it off to let it cool down, and you turn it back on when you need it. This Panasonic G7 does not overheat, so I just leave that running on 4K, 30 frames per second. Now, so which ones do you use? The cheapest setup I can think of is going to be a Sony A6 series, A6000. If you want the flippy screen so you can see yourself like I am right now, you probably want the A6400. If you don't want to worry about the time limit, then get the A6600. But like I said, if you're holding it and you're filming, you may not have to worry about that 30-minute limit and turn it off and turn it back on. Everybody with the A7 III does that. Artem does that, and his footage is awesome because it's a full frame. He understands that he can get the most light out of that camera. I'm doing this because this is how people without a gimbal hold their. I think people without a gimbal hold their camera because they want to make it real steady. So anybody without a gimbal is going to be walking around like a ninja. So put it in perspective that this may look heavy, and yes, it does add up, but walking like a ninja the whole time is also a painful task and skill. So cheapest setup would probably be this one, A5100, but I wouldn't recommend it because it overheats more than the other A6 series. So A6000, A6400, or A6600, and get a good lens. The lens is important because even though you have a nice large sensor, and if I haven't mentioned this, the A6 series all are crop sensors. Now you get full frame, and then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. We don't want to use something with a sensor this small. We want something that's basically a single lens reflex SLR camera with either a crop sensor or preferably a full frame, but full frames go into the thousands. Crop sensors work really well, guys. You can't tell that much of a difference unless you're really in a cave. You have very, very poor lighting. And in order to use that, utilize that sensor, we need a lens that can bring in the light. Now, we rely on a lens generally that has a good aperture. Aperture is measured by f-stop. So this one has a aperture of 1.4. That's why you see that shallow depth of field, where you can see me, but you can't see anything behind you. It separates this from a GoPro. If I had an aperture of 4, then everything will get more and more in focus. Someone 6 feet behind me would be more in focus. If that's your thing, that's cool. Sometimes too shallow depth of field is not a good thing, where you don't even know where this person is standing. If you have a aperture of 1.4 and for some reason you're filming 2 arm wrestlers in a table and you can't even see the crowd, all you see is a big fat blur, that may be a little too much. You're going a little too artistic there, right? You want to be able to see what's going on back there, but you don't want to be able to identify, I know who that person is. The focus is on the pullers. So I like to use something with the lowest aperture, and if I have to, I can dial it up to like a 2, from 1.4 to 2, and if I really have to, bring it up to 3. But that's what really sets you apart from the cheaper cameras, being able to have that aperture setting really low, or the f-stop really low. So with that, I said so far, I like Sony for its autofocus. It's the fastest autofocus on the market. This Panasonic has the crappiest autofocus, but it's crisp when you manually focus, and that's why I use this one on the tripod. You'll see this one on the tripod, and I set it for manual focus, so I don't ever have to worry about it trying to track. You'll see a lot of cameras focus in and out, trying to get the best image. Once you find where you're supposed to focus on, just lock into it and go into manual focus. For $500 on a tripod, you can't beat this. And that's about it, guys. YouTube generally has their settings on 1080. So even if you get an expensive camera with 4K, which is nice, it's going to be compressed. So don't waste your money that much yet, unless you're trying to future-proof everything. But there are some cameras that can go up to 8K. resolution is not quite, we're not quite there yet, especially if we're trying to share on YouTube. If you get something really with a quality sensor like a Sony and record at 1080, you're good to go. Quality like this is going to run you shy about, if you buy used, maybe $800, and then get yourself a gimbal and you got something $1,000, and that is going to give you something awesome. And if you don't want to hold it, use a tripod and you're good to go with this. $500. This lens is maybe $200, $250, and then use a nice tripod. Don't get a cheap tripod because you have something hundreds of dollars on top of it. So yeah, I think that covers it, guys. Let me know what you think. I'll, in the description below, I'll give you a few options based on pricing. But all in all, what we're trying to look for something is something, even though it doesn't sound economical, it's much cheaper than the other options that when we're looking into 4K with higher frames per second and looking for image stabilization. All of those things add up, and then you can easily get a lens that is already $2,000. So yeah, there's that, guys. So yeah, in the description below, I'll give you some examples of what I would use or what I use currently. All right, take care, guys. Bye.